Morning, morning, everyone. Welcome to one of our WFaria digital events. We have this morning the pleasure to receive our colleague and of counsel of WFaria attorneys, Mr. Carlos Fernando Lima, former federal prosecutor of the Brazilian MTF, and we're going to discuss this morning the Leniency Agreement. Good morning, Carlos.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
Good. As a matter of introduction, we would like to announce that Mr. Lima is joining WFaria attorneys as an off counsel, helping us with investigation, compliance, and leniency agreement issues, as well as any negotiation with the Brazilian federal government. Mr. Lima, as you are aware, is one of the faces of the car wash operations, a task force that he co-led. But I would like to start, Carlos, with an introduction of your academic background that not many people know about, and you have an outstanding academic career. Can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit to us about your degrees?
Well, Wilson. I need to say something about my prosecution career here. It's a lifelong one in Brazil. I completed more than 40 years in the public service before my retirement, spending more than 28 years as a prosecutor. I was a state prosecutor. In 1995, I became a federal prosecutor. I oversaw large investigations since the beginning of my career in the federal prosecuting service. The acronym in Brazil is MPF. It's easier to say. The first place where I worked as a prosecutor was Iguaçu Falls, in our triple border with Argentina and Paraguay. And our triple border is the main entrance of drugs, arms, and illegal money in Brazil. Because of that, in my 23 years as a federal prosecutor, I became an expert in white-collar crimes. Before the car wash investigation, I developed a number of other successful cases. One of them, the Banestado case, is an investigation about the illegal dollar market here in Brazil and the money laundering related schemes abroad. Banestado case was the biggest white-collar crime investigation here before the car wash itself. After that, I took my Master of Law in Cornell University Law School, where I studied white-collar crimes and financial institutions. After the Banestado case, I realized that I need to understand the American experience in fighting money laundering. During my studies there, I fell in love with compliance. It is a great university, a great law school. After my return from the US, I was a deputy head of the MPF International Cooperation Department, and because of my experience, in 2014, I was invited to join the car wash task force with some of the prosecutors that had worked with me in Banestado case. We are more experienced, and Brazil had new statutes that could help white-collar crime investigations, and because of that, we reached the results we reached results that were hard to imagine when we began.
Actually, regarding the Leniency Agreement, you are actually the creator of the Leniency Agreement. I'd like you to talk us through the development of this institute in Brazil and your participation on that. Don't be humble, huh?
Oh, okay. It's in fact the best instrument to fight crimes that happen inside large corporations or are committed by criminal organizations is to provide incentives for some of the criminals to become collaborators of justice. There are several types of incentives, but the most common is the reduction or even the exemption of sanctions. These apply not only to criminals, but also to companies that end up being involved in such situations. Here in Brazil, there is no corporate liability for crimes except in the environmental area. But companies are subject to significant fines in case involving public corruption. There are several statutes that apply in these situations. We may quote two of them, anti-corruption law and the administrative improbity law. I think it's the best translation here. In addition, no company wants to make headlines because of federal police operation. Companies need a solution to escape of this dilemma. And anti-corruption law created the possibility of a leniency agreement in case of corruption. In case of corruption, but it was not working. The goal was for companies to get a fine reduction if they raised information about corruption regarding regarding their activities. But this bill, a copy of the leniency agreement in our antitrust law, did not create enough incentives for companies to enter in such agreements. In Brazil, most companies are family managed. Thus, disclosing the information to the authorities could imply criminal exposure of the company's top executives, often the main owner or its relatives. What I developed in car wash operation, it was my idea, and I work on that with my colleagues and with our MPF administration. It was a marriage between the company leniency and the cooperation agreement of the executives, adding great value to the agreement with the MPF, with Lava Jato or car wash. Both agreements are very complementary because the companies have the documents, and the collaborators tell the story of the crime, that which is not within the documents. Because of that, because of my idea, we are the first agents to sign a leniency agreement in a corruption case here in Brazil.
Turning to the car wash task force, Although every Brazilian, every professional in this area around the world know car wash, I believe many don't know the magnitude of this operation. Can you put it down in numbers for us? How was the recovery, the countries involved? Can you do a summary for us of the task force?
Okay. The car wash case is remarkably similar to the Manipolite investigation in Italy. I don't know the name of this operation in English,
Clean
but
hands.
Clean Hands. Uh, Both cases revealed an extensive corruption net in the government, here in the federal government. In fact, it involved not just the politicians at the federal government, but also in the opposition. Um, we discovered was a race for illegal money to finance elections. There are several schemes here to divert money from state-owned companies and from the government itself. But it was not just about Petrobras, but also Eletrobras, the Olympic Games, the football or soccer World Cup, and so on. It was not just an endemic problem here in Brazil, but in fact it was, or it is it was a systemic corruption organized by the major parties. Because of that, it was a very difficult investigation, and similarly to Manipolite, our Italian sibling, full of backlash, full of setbacks. But despite all, it was a successful investigation. Before the political system reacted, we are able to show tons of evidence on the extension of those schemes in our government. Using instruments like individual collaboration agreements and leniency agreements, the investigation ran very fast in the first 3 years because of those deals. Car wash secured more than 15 billion reais for its victim, something now I think $3 billion. We press charge against more than 500 individuals. We have 4 different investigations, one here in Curitiba, one in São Paulo, another one in Rio de Janeiro, and the biggest one, a very important one in Brasilia about the politicians. That alone would to be enough to understand the reason why car wash is a world paradigm in white collar crime investigation. But there are other progresses that the case brought about. As an example, that car wash is a landmark in compliance here in Brazil. We have been witnessing since the investigation that compliance is a growing concern for Brazilian companies, despite all the backlashes, especially on punishing people accused of corruption. The car wash case changed the way prosecutors and investigators fight corruption in Brazil, and it will be forever.
You mentioned there compliance and compliance agreement. Can you comment on the importance of compliance programs in this kind of agreement? How it helps in the negotiation with the authorities, how it could reduce penalties, for instance?
Okay, the main goal of the leniency agreement is to get evidence of public corruption, of a public corruption scheme. This evidence will allow the authorities to deepen the investigation and press charge against the public official involved. The main discussion that will occur in the negotiation process will be the completeness of the evidence and its ability to help the investigation. However, there are other aspects to be considered. First of all, the obvious one, it's important that the company are committed to stop criminal activity. It's obvious. Another aspect is the company obligation to carry out full investigation. If they have not already been done, the investigation to verify the extension of the facts.
Their own internal investigation, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there must also be a commitment to implement a compliance program to prevent similar events in the future. For our Office of the Comptroller General, our CGU, an appropriate compliance program, even if they are violated, can lead to a decrease in the fine to be imposed. Perhaps the incentives here offered by our legislation are not yet sufficient, but they were already significant to bring companies to the negotiating table, in large cases such as car wash. Here in Brazil, both the individual collaboration agreement, our colaboração premiada, and the leniency agreements need to be extensively negotiated. Therefore, it is necessary that the negotiators, whether from the government or from the company, have the ability to put themselves in the role of the other and understand the problem in the broadest and most strategic way. This will prevent minor issues or idiosyncrasies of those involved from making the outcome uncertain or less than ideal. In this respect, the integrity program or the compliance program becomes an important element of the negotiation and should be laid out from the beginning of the agreement negotiation. Especially since it will be determined whether there is a need of monitoring the company during the leniency agreement implementation. It is precisely the extent of the fraud and the need to establish a turning point for the company that will establish the need and duration of monitoring. This is a new institute here, a new instrument here, but it has already been applied in the Odebrecht case, in the Odebrecht agreement. It is something we will see more and more in the future, I believe.
So what you are saying is that the Brazilian authorities will demand Brazilian monitors to oversee leniency agreements here in Brazil.
Exactly.
Not those monitoring that are negotiated with foreign authorities as the DOJ.
No, not just that. The Odebrecht experience. We have in the Odebrecht experience, we have two monitors,
Mhm.
one American motor and one here, Brazilian lawyer.
The CDU itself it's placing their professionals as monitors as well, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a different thing. Uh, they use their officials as monitors, but they are more they are overseeing everything, uh, and we they, it's different from monitoring, in fact, because monitoring is hiring a lawyer to be the bridge between the compliance officer inside the company and the authority. It's a little bit different.
Do you believe there will be some the issue of normative or legislation regarding this Brazilian model monitoring?
Uh, we don't have monitoring in our legislation.
Yes.
We- I don't know if it is necessary because
Eh,
it's about negotiation.
mhm.
It is if you put that on agreement in an agreement, uh, it will be law between the parties, and I think it's a good thing to do even in the absence of statute about that. In Banestado case, I created, in fact, the individual collaboration agreement. 10 years before uh, we have a statute uh, about that. We have our law against criminal organizations. And I think we need to be bold as a prosecutor, we need to be bold as a lawyer and create alternatives because it's about negotiation, not about statutes.
A leniency agreement during this negotiations we've been through in the car wash task force, and also coming back to the compliance program. We know that many of those companies had actually compliance departments, compliance professionals, and compliance programs, but they were not actually overseeing the right things. Uh, what did you look for during this negotiations that would show you that the company had or had not a effective compliance program?
In fact, most of the construction companies involved in car wash case had compliance programs, uh, very well designed compliance programs, but it was in fact a paper program, not a real program, because the program lack the, how do I say that, the tone of the top. In fact, we what we find what we found there is a department of bribery, side by side the compliance department. It was something uh, funny, in fact, because they have people trying to do the right thing, and the other in same room we have people controlling the bribes, and it is something that we need to avoid here in the future. Companies need to understand that they need to do the right thing, because nobody wants to be in the headlines of the newspapers here in Brazil, being a target of a federal police operation, a federal police investigation. It's terrible to the reputation, the company's reputation.
Okay, in the US, the DOJ has instruments like the non-prosecution agreements, the deferred prosecution agreements that they use very frequently. We here have the Leniency Agreement. Can you outline to us what are the main differences between those institutes, and what it results from those differences in terms of strategy?
Okay, the idea, as I said, the idea of the Leniency Agreement is to encourage companies to bring about information related to corruption public officials. The interest of the Brazilian authorities is to come up with evidence against the corrupt public agent, proof enough to convict him criminally and exclude him from the public service. The American authorities also have this interest in case of corruption, or better, in case of corruption of their public agents. But for our analysis here, that is for cases of violation of the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act. The aim of the American authorities is to prevent the use of corruption by companies worldwide. The goals are different and the methods are different. The power of American prosecutors and the consequence of litigation in the United States are severe, and it leads companies to disclose the facts to DOJ. The proceedings imply the presentation of all the information and evidence gathered from the investigation, the internal investigation, and the improvement they need to show the improvements in the compliance program too. Here in Brazil, the incentives are much smaller. Companies are not subject to criminal prosecution as they are in the US. Civil lawsuits in Brazil are endless. Our judiciary has problems here, big problems here. Even though Brazil has countless statutes punishing the same fact, it still punishes, but it still punishes very few. Only in more serious cases, such car wash operation, do companies really approach the government for a settlement. There is more room for strategic decision of whether or not to present the facts to the authority here in Brazil. For a company subject to the FCPA, of course, settling in Brazil is part of the overall strategy for solving the problem. Here, we need to understand the dynamics of the facts, and whether here we are talking about the lawyers, the companies, need to understand the dynamics of the facts and whether there are investigations by the authorities. The only thing that I believe is essential here is a very well conducted internal investigation. It results in the information that can allow the board to understand the consequence of an eventual investigation from the government. The internal investigation become possible to correct the controls, improve compliance, punish the responsible agents, and the main thing, if the decision is for disclosure, it's necessary to think which agents, which instrument, and the limits of the negotiation. Here in Brazil, we have no clear path to that.
You mentioned again the internal investigation importance. What is the, and I'm being a professional that does this kind of work, what is the credibility as internal investigation would have in negotiating with the authorities? And what do you look at an internal investigation to determine if it is seriously done or not?
Well, I can say okay, that my experience as a federal prosecutor, that the internal investigations, and we have monitoring in the Odebrecht case, and we have we participate of the results of the internal investigation proceeding in Petrobras. That the lawyers, the team that are doing the internal investigation are candid and trustful in their relationship with the authorities, and we need to understand that the company are really committed to the best result, to have an agreement, because there is no way to discover things unless you have this internal investigation. When we work as a federal prosecutor, we have a lot of instruments, powerful instruments, but we will find few crimes. Internal investigations are trying to clean up the company, and we need, as a federal prosecutor, we need to understand that the company are really committed to that.
There are, in major investigations, there are cases where the board, especially the board, elects a independent committee, as was the case of Petrobras and Eletrobras, which both were led by former Minister Ellen Gracie. Other companies, they do their own investigations, not led by a independent committee. Is there any difference for the point of view of the NFP on looking at the results of those investigations, if they are either led by an independent committee or not?
Okay, it's somehow it's how do I say that, rhetorical thing. It's about rhetoric. In such cases as Lava Jato, as Car Wash, with some political involvement. We have some politicians involved in the facts. I think it's essential that the company have an independent committee to overview the investigation, because people, not just us, not just the federal prosecution service, but also the population need to be comfortable with that investigation. Federal prosecutors need to believe that it is really independent. And in Petrobras, it was very important, because I remember in the first meeting with Petrobras, when we show for them our findings in car wash case, Petrobras told us that it's impossible, because Petrobras had the best compliance program, the best controls in the oil industry, and other things like that. And it's not true. In fact, there are a lot of Petrobras agents that are involved in corruption, and we need external analysis, independent analysis, independent overseeing to trust the investigation.
Yeah, I believe that a few years ago, that was the first thing companies will do, that they had already done an internal investigation using their internal people, but doesn't fly anymore. I mean, now it's regular that if you have an issue, a serious issue, it needs to be done with external agents. I'm glad we are there already. But Carlos, coming back to Leniency Agreement, this agreement it's a bit tricky in the sense that the main benefits goes to the first disclosure. The first disclosure get the benefits. In this sense, is there other ways that companies that are involved in the same case, for instance, would have other instruments to solve their bribery and corruption problems?
Well, it's a good question. The idea behind the Leniency Agreement is what is called the prisoner's dilemma. The idea is to offer a benefit only to the first one to seek the authorities. Just a minute. The intention here is to break this solidarity, I think it's the word, among those involved in a criminal scheme. The collaboration of one of those involved in the crime is encouraged by the offer of a significant reduction in the penalties, leading to get evidence against the others involved in that crime, especially regarding the corrupt public agents. The restriction that only the first one gets the benefit, while the others will have to face a well-proven criminal charge, is a powerful incentive. Since none of those involved knows of the movement of the others, a great deal of internal tension is created, especially if they know that the authorities are already investigating the activities of the criminal organization. Okay, accomplices start to look around and no longer see the other as an ally, but as a potential informer of justice. Thus, mistrust and fear of losing the first position end up leading one of those involved in a crime to collaborate with justice. This logic also prevails for companies that act in collusion. Leniency agreements emerged, in fact, in the area of cartel fighting and are now being tested in the fight against corruption. Despite their enormous potential, they are not always the solution. They are not always the how do I say that, the leniency agreement is not always the solution to companies' problems. It's necessary to be clear that the strategy to overcome the company's involvement in corruption must be picked on case by case basis. It's very important to get the market as the first to collaborate, but this does not mean that this movement should be made without careful analysis of whole situation, especially here in Brazil. Today, we already have in the Brazilian statutes a new instrument similar to the American No Prosecution Agreement, not just in crime, but also in civil matters, which can become a way out to those cases that not fit to leniency agreements or even have this path blocked because of the laws of the first position. Thus, the main evolution in the last years was the acceptance of a negotiated solution of conflicts here in Brazil with the public administration. If they are about sanctions, we have this possibility. It's necessary to have, as I said, creative work from a team of lawyers to build solutions that meet the interest of the companies. Interest of the companies and their executives and employees and all stakeholders. But also, we need to understand the government itself. Creativity and negotiation are the watchwords in the solution of controversies between the public sector and the private sector from now on.
I want you to dig a little bit deeper on this part of the negotiation with Brazilian authorities and public administration in general, beyond the Leniency Agreement, because we have several agencies like CADE, CDU, etc., with their respective competences. Could you comment about this possible agreements with all those authorities, CVM, CADE, CDU, and etc.?
Yeah, the question here, we here in Brazil, we have in the midst of so many agencies and so many statutes, it's difficult to find a correct answer, to a correct authority to disclose the facts. Consider the number of the authorities, the possible authorities and agents involved in a in a typical car wash case. The construction company involved in the Petrobras corruption, for instance, can be punished for corruption according our anti-corruption law, for administrative improbity according to our improbity law, administrative improbity law, for bid rigging before our antitrust agency, the CAD, as we call, not to mention the criminal charge against its executives, and even a ban on contracting with Petrobras and the government. It's very difficult to navigate around this. The company office may also be searched by the public prosecution service and the federal the public office can be no one wants to have its doors their doors knocked on by the federal police at 6 a.m. And we need to find the correct table to sit at. Each agency has its idiosyncrasies, and it's necessary to be very clear about the possible goals, the limits of the negotiation. It's important to know the result, even the results, even partial of the internal investigations, to find out which is the regulator to be sought first. In the car wash operation, companies opted for the Federal Prosecution Service, simply the MPF, the Car Wash Task Force, simply because they urgently need to control the reputational damages from the investigation. This is perhaps the first question a lawyer should ask himself at the moment of the decision. To what extent are the facts known to the authorities? A police operation knocking on the company's door, making headlines on the daily news, already means significant damage for the company. If there is such a concrete risk, going to the prosecutor should be the first step. Once losing the market would be a big problem. It's not convenient. It's not convenient to wait too long to contact other agents. Ideally, all facts should be already being perfectly investigated. The compliance program should have been improved. The errors corrected, and all responsible agents should have been punished or dismissed. But this is hardly ever the case. So the answer to your question, Wilson, the authority to be sought, the moment when the facts will be presented, what the instrument will be used, will be determined by case. That is why I usually say that the analysis of that situation is almost an art, not than a science. It takes a strategic sensitivity to find the best course of action.
Carlos, I have one last question, then we open for questions of the participants. What is the most important thing, the key in negotiation with the Brazilian authorities to get the best agreement?
Okay, it is always about the evidence. It's always about the evidence. It is the main goal of the leniency agreements. But we need to think about other interests from the government. We need to encourage companies to bring about corruption, to bring facts, information about corruption, and it's necessary to think what is the most wanted thing for the regulators. As a former prosecutor, I can say the most important thing is to uncover the criminal scheme and press well-proved charges against the corrupt public agent. Information and evidence are the most important elements in most cases. What's more, the more criminal facts involving public agents, the more likely the deal. And the higher position of the public official, the more important he is within the government, the more prosecutors will be interested in the deal. In my classes for prosecutors, I'm a professor of the MPF Academy. I have always emphasized that the desire to have this evidence may even cloud the judgment, the prosecutor judgment on the terms of the deal. We as a prosecutor, I know we want to have this evidence. We want to have the facts. The lawyer's task is to make this evidence as attractive as possible to the prosecutors. In fact, it's the main thing. The main task for the lawyers in a negotiation table. In addition, the company's own attitude is also important. In order to reach a good agreement, it's essential that the company and its negotiators have a candid and proactive behavior, try to meet the expectations of the authorities. This also includes showing willingness to correct flaws, to improve the compliance program, and so on. Finally, although these agreements do not require the determination of any compensation for the victims, especially leniency agreements and collaboration, individual collaboration, do not require any compensation, the widest possible compensation should be sought. This will not only serve the government's interest, but also the population itself. Essentially, it's necessary to make the authorities see that that this is an important agreement to meet public interest, and that it will correct the wrongdoing in most fair and complete way.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you very much. I will open for questions now, but I want to already ask you, thank you for this presentation, and also thank you for 40 years of this stellar career in the public sector and to lead this internationally recognized case that was for sure a turning point in Brazilian history. For our viewers, this webinar will be on our YouTube channel, so you can view it afterwards in full. Also, sign up will ask to sign up to our YouTube channel. We have also in WFaria Digital, we have our week journal at Thursday night, 9:30 a.m., where we summarize the legal facts of the week. We have one question here, which is very interesting. Carlos, what do you see in the future of the corruption fight in Brazil? What is the future? What is coming?
Well, it's something sad to say. The fight against corruption here in Brazil suffered many setbacks in recent years. I think that's how progress goes: 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And we are taking this step back at this moment. I believe that the worst is over. The worst is over, but politics in Brazil can always surprise us. I think everything here, even in the US, as the news about the changing in the abortion decision there. You can it is something completely revolutionary, making steps back in an old policy there. But the fact that compliance, internal investigation, and use of negotiation to solve controversies are here to stay. Compliance, for instance, is becoming increasingly mandatory in contracting with the government. The update of the Brazilian public bidding law become compliance mandatory for companies that want to get big contracts with the government. In addition, this update determined the existence of a compliance program should be considered to break an eventual tie in the bidding process. These requirements are spread throughout Brazil. Internal investigations are also increasing in common in Brazil, even outside the scope of large companies. Once this difficult period of the last 3 or 2 years is over, I believe that we will see an advance in agreements with the public administration in most diverse areas. I see a lot of potential, not only in fight against corruption, but also in environment and social areas. No modern economy can work without social and environmental responsibility. We already turned the key in Brazilian law about that. To believe that litigation is the solution to problems in the ESG area is in the past. We will see the construction of very creative agreements in the entire regulatory field, including the prevention of controversies. There is a long way to go, but the car wash operation has shown that it's possible to innovate. Just as I thought when I created the individual collaboration agreement in 2003 and the MPF Leniency Agreement in 2015, lawyers, prosecutors, public agents must be open to ideas, different ideas, new ideas that achieve the best for both parties. I think it's not a zero-sum game, but the search of the best solution that settle the problem for both for government and for the company. I have great faith in this new form of relationship between the private and the public sectors here in Brazil.
Thank you again, Carlos. We are wrapping up. We are out of time, but I want to welcome you to our team at WFaria Attorneys. Again, I want to reinforce the announcement that Carlos Faria Lima, after 3 years of retirement, is joining WFaria as an off-counsel. Welcome to our team. It will be a pleasure to work with you. And for our viewers, thank you for the participation. This webinar will be in our YouTube channel, and I ask you to sign for it so that because you have access to all this content and former webinars and WFaria News publications. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you. Thank you.